promises until after. We'll see what happens. I appreciate that, Jon.
Let's take a deep breath. Down and deep into your belly. Breathe deep down into your belly. Hold it for a few seconds, and then just release whatever the tension's there. Not anymore.
No, get rid of it. Get rid of it. All right. Thank you, Jon. I don't know how to start a podcast, but we're just going to start talking.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So first, Jon, thanks for doing this. I appreciate it more than you will ever know. This kind of stuff's been rolling around my head the last couple of years, and you know, those people who do know our story, and I'll share it some other time. But you know, we have come to the conclusion, you and I, that there's a lot of hurt out there, and especially when it comes to men, we don't talk about it, and it's becoming kind of an epidemic. So thank you for allowing me to do this. Thank you for, you know, providing the equipment to do this, and all that you've done, and especially just in the last couple months, you know. But I do want to say a big thank you to letting us use your space.
Of course. Yeah.
Studio Wildwood is amazing. When you first were telling me about it, I was like, dude, it's just a room. Like, it's, you know, I kind of expected, we were calling it a studio, I kind of expected to walk in and see, like, you know, Dre and Slim Shady laying down some tracks or whatever, but
like the proper studio.
Yeah, but then I walked in here and I got it, and I think, I don't know that the camera will capture what it is. There's just a certain kind of coming up the stairs, kind of leaving your garbage at the door, and this is, even though it's only been a couple times, this has inspired some amazing conversations between the two of us, and you can talk about it a little bit later, but it's also inspired a lot of great art coming out of here, and in the future we'll see some of that.
Yeah, just getting started.
Yeah. But I do want to say thank you very much for that.
Of course, it's our pleasure.
It is just an authentic room that, you know, I try to explain it to people, and they're like, oh, cool. I'm like, no, you have to feel it, because it's something. And then to look outside and see the old growth forest, and just I went out just for a few minutes while we were getting some other stuff ready, and just stepped outside, and it is just an amazing space. So
the trees are alive. This forest is alive.
Yeah, they're just talking to you.
As much a part of it as anything else.
Yeah. So, real quick, let's just talk. There's a funny kind of story. We have known each other for a long time. You know, decades. Sophomores, and since we were freshmen, actually.
Yep.
Then pretty much stopped talking, you know, after we graduated, and then 30 years later, I sent you a Facebook poke. Which is not something I do. You know, if you go onto my Facebook and look at friend requests, I don't accept people's friend requests. Like, I don't do it. But I was talking to my son, and he's like, yeah, just see if he wants to do something. And I did, and you answered pretty quick, and I was very thankful for that. And
I was really excited to hear from you, and I was even more excited to hear you were living as close as you were. I thought you were still in Manitowoc, Milwaukee. I didn't know where you were at. Yeah, you were right down the road. So.
Yeah, we bounced around a little bit, but Wisconsin brings us back, and I don't know why. I hate my face hurting half the year, you know, from the freezing cold and shoveling and all that other stuff. But, you know, warmer climates are in our future, I think. But so we just kind of agreed to meet up, and you know, went to some
horrible burritos.
horrible
Some
burritos.
of the worst burrito. I think it might have been the worst burrito I've ever had in my life.
You know, we should have known.
It was very bad.
When we walked in at 11:30 on a Monday, and it was nobody there, we should have just turned tail.
Yeah, the staff was like, "There's people.
Yeah.
Do we have any food that we can feed? Yeah, we've got some leftover stuff."
It was definitely Saturday night's cuisine, recycled. But my favorite part of that was you asked for a drink, I believe with no ice, and I asked with ice, and they brought the complete opposite. And but even that kind of experience. But we sat and talked for 4 hours.
Yeah, we did.
And caught up.
Yeah, we did.
Because our lives are so vastly different than they were, obviously, when we're 16, 17 years old.
Yeah.
And I think that we're finally at a place where those conversations that we used to have, pretty meaningless, you know, high school conversations, and not to discredit them, but they're not this.
Yeah.
You know, where we found out each other, we're in a place where there's a lot of hurt, and instead of all right, buddy, good luck.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we decided, you know, to take steps to help each other.
Yeah.
You know, and really kind of subconsciously at first, you know, and then this kind of stuff comes out organically. But I kind of looked at you, and we had said some things. I've done some therapies that you knew about,
Mm-hmm.
and you said something very clear to me, and I took that to heart, and I'm like, you're right. This doesn't work for me. You know, I'm doing this, continuing to do this on a hope,
Mm-hmm.
and the hope is fading.
Mm-hmm.
So why stick around? And I just want to clear up, first of all, anything we say here, dude, go talk to your doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Don't listen to
100%.
two old. God, we're getting to where we can be called old.
Yeah.
That's scary,
Yeah,
but go listen to your doctor if you're having any sort of mental health issues or suicidal ideation or depression. Go talk to your healthcare professional.
100%.
You know, get a second opinion, get a third opinion.
Yes.
You know, look outside the medical. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit too. But look outside of just drugs.
Yes.
And look at some of these other therapies that have been very helpful for people in the past.
Absolutely.
You know, they're having some great research come through that are showing some great things on the horizon. Unfortunately, we were kind of talking about this before the episode started. We live in a society where we're afraid, you know, to talk about some of those other, you know, we're definitely of the just say no generation, you know, or dare to say no or whatever it is. But
cops in the head.
Cops in the head, right? You know, I think I said to you, I'm afraid to disappoint that cop that's been dead for 40 years.
Right,
you know?
right.
And but it's you know, this where we were stuck at. So we're gonna talk about some of that stuff, and you are on some pretty cutting edge stuff, and it's interesting. The thing that makes me laugh is whether you believe in God or some higher being, whether that's the universe or something put us in the right place.
Yeah.
And that doesn't always happen, but it's very cool to have this kind of whatever. But I'm talking too much. But
it's all good.
Yeah.
It's all good.
So, you know, I wanted to talk about that a little bit. I do have some notes here because I'm old. My memory's kind of gone. But if you want to just kind of share your backstory a little bit, you know, like I said, we knew each other in high school when we had, you know, I kind of wish I had those days again. I look at my sons now and I'm a little jealous of their lazy days, their throwaway days that are so important, but we don't see them then. So if you can just kind of take from high school on and then share with us what led you to where you are now, and more importantly, the things that steered you in a different direction from the path you thought you had.
Sure, yeah. Well, I mean, that's a lot of ground to cover. I'll try to be succinct.
So I thought I would throw the whole roll out there at once.
Yeah. Well, you know, the highlights, you know, was, you know, when I decided to study architecture. I went to the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee, studied at the School of Architecture and Urban Planning, and decided to pursue a graduate degree, got my master's degree there. And as I approached my last semester, I was hanging out playing pool with a friend, and I met this girl, Candy, and she was hanging out at Axel's in Milwaukee, a dive bar, a great little dive bar. And I saw her from across the room, and I immediately knew there was something about her. There was just something about her. And I said to my friend, Nick Blavitt, we were playing darts. She was playing pool, we were playing darts. I said, who is that girl? Like, there's something about her. And he says, you know, oh, that's Candy. I'll go introduce her. And he went over and got her. And I'm like, no, don't.
Dude, I'm an introvert. Leave me alone.
Yeah, what are you doing? No. And so she comes over. She's really cool. And we just started talking about the meaning of life immediately. Like, the very first topic of conversation was like, we started talking about the meaning of life. And I don't know why or how it came up, but it was great. We had a really good time. And I became very attracted to her. I tried to get as much time with her as I possibly could, trying to figure out, you know, where was she eating lunch? Could I meet her in the cafeteria? I just spent a lot of time trying to figure that out.
Because you had a time frame that you had to adhere to.
Right, exactly. I was about to graduate, and, you know, it just needed, I just really liked her, you know, and I wanted to spend time with her. So we did. We spent a lot of time together and found out that we were actually signed up for the same trip to Europe that was going to be leaving in June of that year, and this was in January that we started talking. And so I was working on my master's thesis at the time. So I was like in the studio, in school all the time, working on the thesis project. She wasn't at her thesis yet. She was going to be doing that the next semester. But we got to know each other, and then with that trip coming up, we became pretty fast friends, knowing that that was going to be the case. We were going to be spending the summer essentially in Europe. And so we started dating, and when we were in Europe, we were pretty close right away. We knew just about everything about each other quickly because we talked about everything. We were very open and transparent, developed a great friendship, and I felt very confident that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her.
And how long are we talking? Like 6 months after we meet her?
Yeah, okay. Not even.
Okay.
I think it was January, February or so. We had to go to Home Depot to get supplies for Nick, the same guy that introduced us, was working on his thesis, and he needed a piece of plywood or something. So that was our first time really going out together. Like, let's go get a piece of plywood.
So it's such a great first date.
It was romantic, yeah. I was
Home Depot, just bringing people together.
But yeah, we did that, and then and so when we were in Europe, like I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her, and I knew that my mom and my grandma had been at a diamond place in Amsterdam, and so I thought, well, if I'm ever going to buy a diamond, what more meaning could there be than buying a diamond at the place that my mother and my grandmother had been together, previously, and I think Koster's Diamonds was the name of it, I believe. I'm not sure about that. But anyway, so I went there, and I was honest with Candy. I said, I think her name was Candy. I don't know if I ever said that, but I said, I think I might buy a diamond here, and I wanted her input on it. I wanted to make sure it was going to be just right. It's one of the things you really would probably keep a secret under ordinary circumstances, but it was just the two of us.
Yeah. And
so we talked about it, and she knew that and she helped pick it out. And so I kept it in my pack. We were packing through Europe, excuse me, and I kept it, just kind of tucked away in my pack. And one of the trips that we took was to Switzerland, and we went to this little village in the Swiss Alps called Le Chab near Verbier in Switzerland. And this is where my great-great-great-grandfather had been baptized and married, and a whole bunch of Brouchoud ancestors came from this little tiny village. And so I thought, where would I ever find a place that's that romantic? What a great place, what a great connection. And so we went into the chapel where my great-great-great-grandfather was baptized and married, and I proposed to Candy, and she said yes. And so it was just an amazing trip. Like, we spent a lot of time in Europe and Paris, and we went up to London and Berlin and down to Rome and all over the place, Amsterdam. We just had an amazing trip.
Yeah.
And then came back to the States and moved to Madison, just halfway between. She was from Dubuque and I'm from Manitowoc, so Madison was right in between. It's a cool town. So we decided to move here, and we did. That's kind of
And to me, the story of that is just, like you talk about the right place, right time.
Yeah.
Her playing pool, you throwing darts.
Yeah.
Your friend happening to know the girl playing pool. And those kind of things don't often line up.
No.
So, but one of the other things you said to me was your attraction to Candy was something very fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like what did you say? She shared the same sort of weirdness that you are, right?
Yes.
Like, can you just kind of, what's that like? Like, because I think a lot of people, especially people who get, married when they're younger, they kind of look for maybe, she reminds me of this, or she reminds me of that. Yours is just this, she gets me kind of moment, and a lot of us don't have that, or we thought we had. This was a genuine, just two people just being so in sync with each other.
Absolutely, yeah. We used to say that we were the same kind of weird. We were weird insofar as, I don't even think weird is really the right word for it, but I think authentic is the right word.
Yeah.
Right? She was authentic, and I think that's what I was really attracted to, was the fact that she wasn't, she was finding her own way through the world. Like, she wasn't afraid to do things because it's not something everybody does. She did whatever needed to be done to get to her goal, and that's how I was too, and that's largely how we lived our lives together, is, we didn't follow the traditional career path. We were supposed to be architects, right? And We certainly practiced with a number of firms and got our experience, but then immediately started our own practice because we wanted to have independence in our own business. So we started Crescendo Design, and we were designing environmentally friendly, sustainable homes throughout the Midwest, and just really did things the way we wanted to and ran the business the way we wanted to. It was very non-traditional in many ways. We were even doing, trying to do sustainable, environmentally friendly design. We were caretakers of a nature center in Manitowoc County at the time, Kingfisher Farm, and trying to get the message out about the value of environmentally, sustainable building practices was very, very difficult. It was about educating the client first and then starting to think about design. And but we did that, and it was fantastic. And we then got interested in virtual visualization, mainly me. I was kind of really obsessed with this idea of, we've got these clients all over the Midwest, like how do we allow them to visualize what these buildings are going to look like before we construct them in the real world? So I was very interested in visualization and started using virtual technology to help our customers, really visualize these buildings. And it was very successful. Like at the time we were using Second Life. It was a multiplayer virtual world that anybody who knows what Second Life is going to laugh. But it was the only place that I knew of. When I did my master's thesis, I tried to use the engine that was used to build EverQuest to bring architectural projects into a virtual world. But EverQuest obviously was owned by Sony. They didn't give you access to the engine. But Second Life was a place where you could build, three-dimensional models in real time. And so I went to the computer and built a replica of a house that we were about to create in the real world, to actually construct in the real world. And I built it in a sandbox, and it's a multiplayer environment. People from all over the world are walking around in avatars. And I built this replica, and it was pretty interesting that within a few hours I was able to kind of mock that up. But the next morning I woke up and I had left that model in there. Someone had taken and built a whole neighborhood of those houses, and they had them. People were living in the living rooms, drinking coffee on the couch. Like it was just, there were cars and motorcycles in the driveways, and so I became obsessed with this idea of these virtual technologies that could be used to solve real-world problems and actually let people actually experience what it's like to live in these places before they're built. So Candy and I started moving more in the virtual direction and started a company called Arch Virtual. And that company was really intended to focus on using virtual technologies to solve real-world problems.
Yeah, not just architectural.
Yeah, not just architectural. That's a good point. We kind of branched out from there because we got our hands on one of the very first VR headsets that were in this current iteration of VR. VR has been around for a long time, but the Kickstarter that Palmer Luckey put out for the Oculus Rift, we got one of the first few hundred headsets that came out. It was just like one step above the prototype duct tape models that they had, and we had one of the first few hundred of them, and we started publishing all of our architectural stuff online. And at the time there was only a few hundred of these headsets, so nobody had anything to do. There was no games, there was no content, there was nothing to do. Everybody started downloading these architectural visualizations, and we got an early break, and ExxonMobil hired us. We were doing subsurface data visualization. We were doing a racing game for Suzuki through the Himalayan mountains using a steering wheel at the International Auto Expo in Mumbai. We did the entire Sacramento Kings arena, and we modeled Boogie Cousins, and he comes out and greets you at half court, and it was just a really exciting time.
Yeah.
We really enjoyed that. And I guess from there we started doing hospital visualizations to help doctors and nurses visualize an operating room before you're building it in real life, and it costs tens of millions of dollars to build these highly sophisticated medical environments. You want to be able to try it and make sure it's going to work. So we would replicate that in a virtual environment. The doctors would go through it, they would find errors, and they would we would make revisions until it was perfect, and then they would build it. And we had patients in the operating room that were laying there to help simulate what it was going to be like. And Dr. Bauman, a collaborator that I met, he was working with Adtalem Global Education at the time, said, well, you've got the operating room, you've got a patient there, why don't we train doctors how to intubate that patient using virtual reality? And so we built a project called Airway Lab, and it was a medical simulation experience, which was the first time I had ever experienced that. And we debuted it at the International Medical Simulation in Healthcare Conference in LA. And we won Best in Show with it. And it was like everybody was, we had lines around the conference hall waiting to try it out. It was really cool. I think we were the first, if not one of the first companies to have a VR headset. at the world's largest simulation conference. So I decided that, there's a lot of promise here, but we're still doing a lot of, very, discipline agnostically. We're working across a lot of disciplines, but my dad, Jon Brouchoud, got really sick around this time, and he was in a hospital in Green Bay. And when I was there, I saw some really eye-opening experiences in terms of the difference between somebody who comes into when you're in the hospital with someone you love. There's a difference between somebody who comes in and has experience and they're really good at what they're doing and someone who does not.
Right, you're really uber focused on that because it's someone you love, and you're looking at the level of care. Yeah. And maybe even more importantly, the bedside manner, 100%. And how these people are interacting in real time with your loved ones. So, yes. Then obviously focusing on them is your paramount, right?
Yep.
Right then. There's nothing else you can do. They're the professional.
Yep.
But you can see how they handle themselves. So
absolutely,
it's very important.
And at one point he had crashed. He was in shock and he was about to pass away, and he was rushed to the ICU. And I'll just never forget. When he went there, he couldn't respond. He had no idea. He was very, very sick. And in that ICU, I saw this doctor and a team of nurses come in. Nurse Chris, I'll never forget. She came in and the doctor said, "I need this, 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 and this." And she's like, "You guys need to leave the room for a little bit." And I don't know, we were out of the room for maybe 45 minutes, and we came back in, and he's sitting there, and he's sitting upright, and he's looking around like, "Hey, what's everybody so worried about?" Yeah. And he was fine. And it was, that just woke me up to what medicine can be and how important that is. And then later seeing some of the care that wasn't so stellar, right? So people would come in that didn't have experience, and they were doing things and preparing bandages that was just done wrong. I knew it was wrong, even just looking at it.
A layperson just sitting there like, that's not how you do that. So, and
being a perpetual sort of entrepreneur, like I couldn't help but to be, asking lots of questions. Where did you study? Did you work with, how did you learn how to do this? I learned all about plastic mannequins that they use for simulation, and the deficiencies of that technology, and also how important it is. It's a life-saving, demonstrated, tried and true modality for learning,
but done with very antiquated equipment.
$150,000 mannequins. They're all athletic white male mannequins. They don't represent the actual patient population that these students are going to be really serving.
They're working on the 1%.
Yeah. And they lay there, right? And it's like, to make them look cold, they have little blue lights in their cheeks that come on, and it's the really expensive, like $200,000 ones can generate a tear. There's a little tear they can generate, and they grunt, and they But when I knew what we could do in virtual reality, I'm like, we can make that patient so real you'll forget. Like, it'll freak you out how real it is. And so that's where I got really interested. I remember calling Dr. Bauman from the parking lot of the hospital, and I was like, I want to dedicate my life to medicine. Like, this is unbelievable, and I know that we can make a difference, And so he supported that and gave me a lot of guidance along the way, and we started doing medical and healthcare. And we built our platform called Acadicus, which is the Latin name for the owl that my dad studied. So every year, you might remember in school, my dad would bring in a saw-whet owl. They're little tiny owls, not much bigger than your fist, and he would bring one into school. I got to be a big shot that day. My dad's bringing an owl into school. But he studied this little owl, and the Latin name was Acadicus. So we called our healthcare platform Acadicus, and we launched 6 years ago, 2018, and that's kind of where the VR business kind of left off at that point.
Talk about your dad a little bit, because I know, even in just this little bit that we talked about, you talked about your nature and the conservation and how important that stuff is. You talked about your dad, but bridge that gap, because I know that was so important to him.
Yeah, absolutely. He founded a nature center called Woodland Dunes Nature Center in Two Rivers, and I grew up just hanging out at the nature center, and he had a very strong, ethic of nature preservation, and preserved, hundreds and hundreds of acres of land, really important diversity of ecological systems. And I just learned a lot from him. And not just that, but he knew how to talk to everyone. It doesn't matter who you are, what your background is, or anything. He could talk to anyone, and he could get people to work together, and he knew how to get things done, right? He had a lot of big ideas, but he knew how to get those ideas done. And I think that's what I took away from my dad. Not only did he leave this legacy of this nature center, but he also taught me how to materialize what you have. Like, a lot of people have ideas, but not everybody can actually get them done. Right?
That's why I'm talking to you right now, John, because I've had this idea for a long time, and I'm like, you know who gets stuff done? John does. But you know, I think a lot of times we talk about dads and how important they are, and you know, you just gave two great examples, but he also gave you this absolute love of the forest and all things nature. And I remember we were having a conversation, and I said, kill two birds with one stone. And you said, what was it?
Feed two birds with one stone.
With one stone. And in that moment, just kind of encapsulated, I'm like, okay, I'm dealing with John. This is who he is. And, you know, there's been those little things that happen when, you know, I think, you know, I kind of said about it before that we couldn't have conversations like this when we were in high school. And as adult men, growing older every day, it's important to have these conversations, and we lose track of those. You know, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but we've kind of coined it like the avatar that you build for yourself.
Yeah.
And as men now, older men, we are starting to drop those, and it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know, being able to share it with a friend is easier. You know, we'll talk a little bit about the healthcare system, but we kind of touched on it now. Adult men in this country, and you know, I'd say past the age 15, 16, they're treated a lot different, especially if you mention any sort of healthcare issues involving your mental health. You know, it's looked as a weakness, and we're doing our best. Part of this is to try to alleviate that. You know, everybody knows. My thing is, I didn't realize everybody has something. You know, when the depression started for me, I thought I was on my own. And a good friend of mine kind of said to me, he's like, you're not alone in this. Everybody you know, I can name 12. I remember it like it was yesterday. He said, I can name 12 people off the top of my head that you and I know very closely who struggle. And that's when it became a relief, but also a huge worry for me that this is happening and we're not really talking about it. So transferring that, you had a huge loss. And then you kind of spiraled into the place where a lot of us are sitting right now, if you don't mind sharing that.
Started approximately 4 years ago, I would say, from where we sit now, sometime around 2020. We'd gone through the pandemic, and right as the vaccine came out, people started getting vaccinated, people started coming out, going to coffee shops, and I had gone to a coffee shop and got, at Firefly here in Oregon, I got a cup of coffee, and I felt like, wow, like this is the first time I've been out, still like wearing freedom. Masks, but being out, you know, freedom. And it was maybe like the next day, Candy had a very strong pain in her side for the longest time, and it was unfortunate because the pain would be worse when she would laugh, and I made her laugh all the time. So it was always like, and she would start, like, she had this like, don't make me laugh, but make me laugh kind of thing, and it was really, but the pain had gotten so bad that she went to the doctor, and so she was diagnosed with stage 4B ovarian cancer. And that was a real tough time. And speaking of how the healthcare system handles things, we weren't actually told by a doctor, but it was, she had a test done, and the next day we had to go to the emergency room because she had very severe cramping and issues. And the nurse came in and said, well, I see that you have stage 4B ovarian cancer. And we looked at each other. She's like, oh, you didn't know that, did you? And it was like, well, we do now.
Thanks for breaking it to us so gently.
It doesn't sound good. So it was a horrible. It was just, you can't imagine it. You know, it's just like, it's numbing. You can't even describe it with words. It's like this huge wave of just uncertainty and questions about what do we do now, and you know. But from that moment, Candy, she had optimism, like she had hope every single step of the way, where she was like, there's always something we can do. So immediately she approached it, I think the way we approach life and business in general, we're going to handle this like we handle everything else, and we're going to go our own way. We're going to forge a path, and we're going to figure this out. So that, you know, we immediately started with treatments and the surgery, and the surgery went really well. And I remember the Brewers were in late stages of the playoffs, and there was a game on. I'm down in the lobby waiting for her to get out of this surgery, this heroic surgery they had to do to try to remove as much of the cancer as they could, because it was spread all throughout her abdomen at this point. And I remember not giving a hoot about the Brewers game, even though Candy was a huge fan. So I was trying to watch it just on her account because I knew I had to tell her when she came out of the surgery whether we won or not, so I better know what happened. But I was like, I couldn't care less. And the doctor came out and he said, the cancer's gone. We got it. We did a surgery, we scraped it all out, we removed the ovaries, and the cancer's gone. And I gave him a big hug, and we were the only ones there. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning or something in the lobby, and I just broke down weeping. Like, I just was so grateful. And I went up there and I told her, she had no idea what was going on. You know, I told her that the Brewers won, and that got her, she smiled. That got her attention. She liked that. But she was out of it from the surgery, from the anesthesia, and so then we had a pretty good stretch after that. There was chemo to help, keep it at bay. Yeah. But I didn't mention this, but we had spent a lot of our winters in California. We drove out there with our car. Luckily our business had a lot of flexibility, and a lot of our business was in California. So we were sort of splitting the difference and going out for winter. And so that winter we decided to take another trip out to California, and we did. And we drove out and we had an amazing time, and it was just absolutely fantastic. We had to sort of jump rope with the chemo treatments. It was a little bit, we didn't have as much time as we normally had because she had to get back for her treatment. And then it wasn't long, I want to say maybe when we got back in like February, March, and it was maybe April. There's a marker, CA125 marker, that indicates whether the cancer is, it's one indication of many that they use to determine whether there's cancer or not. And we were waiting in the lobby at the hospital for an appointment with one of the oncologists that she had been seeing. And she's checking her phone, and my chart has like all the results
all your
on
updates,
there. And it has a graph of your historical sort of marker, and her marker had gone up, and then the surgery it went way back down, and she hit refresh, and the marker was off the charts. And we both just sat there in silence, And we knew right then, but then of course Candy was like, well, now we need better treatment. This treatment's not working, so we need a different treatment. We'll find a way, you know? And so we started looking for experimental, the doctors at UW were phenomenal. They were incredible. They did everything that they possibly could, but they didn't have any trials that she would fit. So I became a quick student of trials, like how does this work? I did a lot of research into which institutions do it, and we got her into a clinical trial at Mayo. And they were having some really great results, and we were really excited and optimistic, and we started spending time in Rochester, and I got to know all about Rochester and the Mayo family and all the history of the Mayo Clinic, which is phenomenal. Anybody's not familiar yet, you should look up the Mayo Clinic and look at the history of it. There's a great documentary. It's a phenomenal institution. And we did the treatments, but it just wasn't enough. And by, I would say, September or so, she started really not being well, but she wanted to fight to get back to the next treatment. And so the next treatment was going to be sometime in September, and so she would work really, really hard to get better and to be able to be strong enough to be able to pass the test that they needed to do the chemo. And but there was some question, she was becoming less and less mobile, like we couldn't move around, but she really wanted to go, so we made it up to Rochester, and just barely, she got to the appointment with the doctor, and the doctor was just basically like, I'm sorry, but you're not strong enough. The chemo we can't do chemo treatment. And so that night we decided to come home, and that we basically, the nurse care that we were having here said, you should probably think about hospice. And Candy never want to talk about hospice or palliative care of any kind. Like, it was just not happening. And the only thing that convinced her to go into hospice was somebody that we were consulting with said that you can go off of hospice. If you get better, you come off of hospice. And she's like, okay, well then we'll do it. So hospice came in, and if there's anybody listening that's you ever end up in a situation like this, do hospice as soon as you possibly can, as early in the process as you can, because there's comfort measures that they could do. Even if you do end up going back into curative treatment, hospice is a phenomenal thing, and it made her so comfortable. They came in, they got a more comfortable bed, they had just a whole different setup, and
but also comfort for you as well.
Yeah,
right?
Knowing that she was getting really good care, and it was a very different kind of feeling, just because I had been her exclusive, caretaker for a year and a half that she was enduring this, which is also, for anybody listening that's ever gone through this, a tremendous, difficult. It's emotionally, obviously, you're out of sorts. Like you just don't. Your world is upside down. Your soulmate is dying. And you have to be on your toes. You can't miss you got to be sharp with your appointments, all the medications, everything that's going on, and then you're troubleshooting, this tube got blocked, so we need to get this thing, and you're just all day, every day, constantly trying to. And if you don't have something you have to be doing, you have to be anticipating when the next thing's going to be doing. Because I didn't want to fuck it up.
Yeah, preparing for that next thing that goes to hell.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that I was just resolutely focused, and I'm a spiral thinker, so I'm all over the place. But the meditation practice that I had at that time was taught by Karinji. Mado Moore had taught this technique for meditation that I was engaging in on a daily basis, and I think it's that practice that helped me sort of distill all the mud of my mind and allow me to be laser focused on her and be selfless and compassionate toward what she was going through and get me out of the way completely. I just wanted to be invisible, and I wanted to be there to support her for every which way. And I think that practice, every time I would sit, I would always think, I'm clear now, and I'm ready to go back in there and make sure that I'm, so for what it's worth, I think that's another thing to consider if you're a caretaker, having some kind of mindfulness practice. And we can get into how that later on sort of, continued to be a part of the healing journey. But she passed away September 21st, and 2 years ago. And it's been a very, very, very difficult time since then, for sure.
Yeah, I remember when we had our conversation at the terrible Mexican restaurant. Those were kind of things that I think that was the first time that I connected with you on a level, because that spiraled you into depression and anxiety that I was feeling. Yeah. And to see someone who had a clear mind about that was hard, because I still to this day don't understand why I feel the way I do and why the depression is where it is. And I think also I grew up not knowing what depression was. To me, I saw somebody depressed, and I say this a lot, I'm like, what the hell are you depressed for, man? You have a roof over your head, you have a car, you have dinner, what are you depressed with? Suck it up. Yep. And then when you're spiraled into that, and you can't suck it up, you can't explain why you feel this way, because there's no words for it. No. So to see that with you, I kind of was able to say, okay, well, I know these other guys, you don't feel a certain way, but you felt exactly the way I felt. Yeah. And so it was comforting for me to hear that, but on the same side, I'm dying inside for you and your loss. And it was such a eye-opening thing to realize that sometimes just talking about it, having somebody to talk to about it, realizing you're not the only one, that was important to me. But then we started talking a little bit about the meds and stuff like that. So at this time, you just lost your wife. You're trying to adapt to a new life without that. You also have multiple businesses to run and multiple responsibilities. What kind of, because one of the things I kind of analogize it as, when you, in a car accident, you break your arm, you break your leg, an ambulance and a team comes to get you. When you are broken inside, when your head is broken, when your mind is broken, when your thought, nobody comes for you. Nobody is looking for you. Maybe they understand there may be some signs, but they don't come running. Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with the healthcare system when it comes to mental health issues is you have to go to them. Yeah. And you have to go to them multiple times. Mm-hmm. And you have to be your own advocate. Yeah. But sometimes we're not in a place to be advocates for ourselves. Mm-hmm. So what was that process like for you at that time?
Well, right after she passed, I was sort of wrapped in a protective layer of denial.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's the kind of denial that we had through the whole process, which is, you know, you could call it hope, you could also call it denial. Like, we just never talked about there being an ending. It just never ever came up, not ever. And so I was still sort of operating under that reality of like, it's just not, just denying it. And I came to sort of like recognize that that's an important characteristic of how your mind works. It's like, I think it's at the one time you're sort of delusional in a way because you're not accepting a reality. But on the other hand, your mind is protecting you from a reality that would destroy you. If you fully could realize the gravity and permanence of what happened, it would destroy you. So I was sort of like blanketed in this denial for the longest time, and I was resolutely focused on carrying on with our business. Like, we started this business together. She was telling all the doctors when they would come in, like, you got to talk to my husband about the platform we built in this.
She's still selling it.
She's selling it. Yeah, always be selling. She was always selling, and so I'm like, I got to focus on this, and I just went deep dive into work, and
protecting yourself.
Protecting myself. I basically just spent all of my time working, every minute of every day. I couldn't stop just work. I didn't give myself any space for anything other than just work. And taking care of my family, you know, that's a big part of it. But
if you allowed yourself to have any downtime, those thoughts creep in, right?
Oh yeah. Like, it would be, and you know, and I quickly realized the importance of having a therapist. A lot of people talked about it. I didn't do grief counseling. I did or grief groups, because all the grief groups were like old dudes.
This is my favorite part of that story. Is
they're
like,
all old.
Yeah.
Their wives are old. You know, there was nobody my age, and I just did not feel. I don't know. It didn't work. But I got a great therapist, and I had never seen a therapist, like you said, like all my life. It was sort of like just never. You don't talk about your feelings. You know, if you're feeling down, you just get back up. You know,
well, we're of a certain generation where I believe that we were told just push it down.
Yeah,
push it down. And I jokingly say you push it down until you've had your first heart attack at 54, and then change your life.
Yeah.
You know, but you didn't have the options anymore.
It was torn wide open.
And you connected with him right away, right?
Right away. Yeah, right away.
Which most people don't. Like, that's kind of an amazing feat in itself.
Yeah.
But go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no, he was great. Like, and we did, we talked about a lot. And one of the things that early on he taught me was, and he read a passage from a book, and I don't remember what the book was, but it was about grief being about, like, you had this ship and you're in the ocean, and that's your life with your soulmate, your loved one, and then a huge tidal wave came and just smashed that all to bits, right? And then you basically are left scrambling to pick up the bits and build a little raft so you can survive a little bit. And then inevitably another wave comes and smashes that to bits. And this process continuously happens. But the hope is that you gradually start to realize, you get really good at rebuilding the raft, and you get better at, like, anticipating the wave and paddling up so you can get over the top instead of being crushed by it. Although it doesn't always happen that way. That's your goal. You're trying to get to the point where you can manage and survive those ups and downs, because it's just a cyclical, up and down, and you get smashed to bits. And trying to figure out, like, how to want to live, I think is a key, because we did everything together. We were the type of couple that we didn't maintain separate identities. For better or for worse, we merged into one identity. We were one thing. I no longer really had an individual, independent self, and I didn't want one.
Right.
We were fine. We were happy this way. We could think each other's thoughts. We anticipated when we were going to do things, and we were just like in this flow state together all the time. And suddenly, she left, and we spent the last 20 years. We had just celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary 2 weeks before she passed. We were soulmates, and she left, and for 20 years I would go with her. And now she's gone. What am I doing here? Like, why am I here? And so that, I think that became a big part of it, is like not necessarily like wanting to die, but just figuring out how to want to live. I think was the biggest part of that, is like, I don't feel like I had a place. Like, what am I gonna do? And I filled that gap with work, but that obviously wasn't a healthy approach either. There wasn't a lot of healing involved with that. It was more just the denial.
Yeah, but you not only did you lose your wife, you lost a business partner. and your best friend.
Yeah.
And your reason for getting up every day.
Yeah.
And
100%. Yeah.
one of those would have been enough to spiral out of control.
Yes.
He lost all four.
Yes, all at once.
And so you get to the therapist. I'm sure he prescribed some sort of narcotic for you. Maybe that's not the right term, but medicine for you. And then did those things work for you right away, or were you in a place where they were just not cutting it?
Yeah, I didn't go with medication. A lot of people encouraged me to go with medication, but I didn't. I tried to just go without it, and I did. To be completely transparent, I had some experience with THC, smoking weed, cannabis, know, and I found that to be a helpful tool at times in moderation to just kind of help ease some of the anxiety and the stress and the depression and just kind of get my mind off of things. But I didn't take the pharmaceutical approach at all. But we did some deep dives into mental health and framing things, and really I think the biggest thing that therapy gave me was he held space where it was just like, and I'm very much into improvising on piano, playing piano and just coming up with things as I go, and I shared that with him, and he said, well, that's how we're going to approach therapy, where we don't have an agenda. I don't have a bullet point list of things I'm going to work through with you. I want to hear what's going on today, and we'll hold some space and like just share what's going on. And our sessions are just about that process of what's going on right now today, and let's take a look at it. And he's very good at sort of picking out things that I'm saying and pointing them back to me and saying like, now you just said this, let's talk about that, and really excavating some of the more difficult emotions, and then holding space for those emotions and letting you feel those emotions. I think that's the number one key. Is the temptation is you don't want to feel bad, so you try to sort of artificially patch it over and cover over that pain, but you also have to let yourself feel that gravity, feel the emotion. The more you allow that, I think the more room you allow for healing to occur. And that's what the therapy did for me. For sure.
We've also, and I keep saying we've talked about this because we've had some pretty deep conversations. I think part of one of the real issues with depression is it is exactly like joy, complete opposite, but exactly the same. Because you walk in a room joyful, you can give that joy away. People see you smiling, people see you happy, they hear the funny thing that happened, and all of a sudden you just lifted everybody in the room. But depression is the same way. So for a long time, I told people about my depression. I'm very open about it. I talk about side effects of medicine that dudes don't want to talk about because it's uncomfortable. I talk about the suicidal thoughts, the constant worry, the almost inability to get up sometimes. But also, I talk about how you create this facade to put on there to keep people from hearing those things. That's exhausting.
It is.
And people don't understand that's one of the hard things. I touched on it a little bit. I think unless you've been in this place, unless you have been depressed, you can't understand depression in the way that someone who has it has.
Absolutely.
So I fake being happy a lot. Most of us do. And at the end of the day, it's damn tiring. So I've learned to just let those moments have their moment. And like you said, it holds that space for you. I've learned that if I don't realize and I don't give this its due, it'll be crushing for me later on in a moment when I can't let it be. So, I did take the pharmaceutical route. They don't work for me. I've been in places where this has kept me just above water, and that's where I sit right now. It doesn't cure anything. It doesn't really take the thoughts away. I've seen what it does without them, which is terrifying, but I don't want to be on a certain dose for the rest of my life. I want to find something else. And I'm trying to find it. That's what this is all about. I find joy and comfort in talking to people about this. And the kind of messed up part is it's not fun to talk about, but we've laughed a little. when we have those conversations with just me and my boys and we're talking and we're laughing, it feels good.
Yeah.
You know, the whole point of these podcast episodes are to have that deep dive into mostly men, but just mental health issues. And I focus on men because that's what I am.
Mm-hmm.
Not much of a man sometimes, but I think there's a certain thing that a man gets hearing another man talk about the pain,
Mm-hmm.
and I also want to laugh about stuff because that's all that's got me through sometimes, you know. So I've done some of the pharmaceutical things. I've started doing some other things at your not request, but at your mention that, you know, maybe some yoga, maybe some meditation. You know, I try to spend more time outside because it does, you know, like I said, there was a little bit of anxiety coming in and trying to do this. I stepped out onto your patio there for 3 or 4 minutes, took a couple deep breaths, listened to those trees talk, you know, listen to the leaves rustle a little bit, and it changed me.
Yeah,
in just that little bit.
Yeah.
So, so the drugs didn't really work for you, or you didn't. I'm sorry, you didn't do it. Sorry, but you chose a different route, and that's kind of brought us full circle to where we are right now. Kind of explain this,
Sure.
and what this has done for not only your mental health, but you're just finding out who you are now again without candy.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that I started, that I coined, it's probably already a thing, but I call it Wellness Wednesday. So, you know, going either, you know, putting a date on a calendar where you're going to see a therapist, or I canceled my cable so I could afford to get a trainer. And so I can't watch the Brewers anymore. Candy would be a little sad about that, but you know, at the very least, I have a trainer, so I traded that off to be able to
Nice.
do that. And my trainer is In Pursuit Fitness down in the Village of Oregon. Hans is an amazing trainer, and I've got a tremendous amount of value from that. But having that date on the calendar and also paying money for it gets your attention. Like, you got to make sure you don't miss it. So, you know, weeks and days come and go, good, bad, up and down. At least if you have that Wednesday on your calendar, you can't negotiate it. It's Wellness Wednesday. You're going to therapy. You're going to the trainer, and that's just, you know. So, because sometimes when you're down, you don't want to reach out and call a therapist or call your trainer, and like you just are like, nah, today I'm going to sleep in. I'm just not going anywhere. But if it's on your calendar, it's going to happen. So that you got to do it. Especially if there's a financial consequence to it. At least that motivates me a little bit. I'm not going to waste that money. Wellness Wednesday, I would highly recommend that. But yeah, So I mentioned getting excited about running, not excited about, but using all of my energy to continue investing in the business. And I reached a point where the fuel ran out of that tank for me. Yeah. And this happened in January of this year, where I started to feel as if that, you know, the business that we were running was Candy and I, that was our project together, and now she's gone. That project needs to move on in a different way. Yeah. And so I started thinking about, you know, should I sell the company? Should I have other partners involved that can help run the company, and how can I navigate this? And we had to make some really tough choices to keep ourselves financially sound as a company, and I had to let go of some very, very key people on my team
that you had for
for many years, and it pushed me down into a point where I didn't know low could be so low. You know, it was already, grief was already, I was at the bottom. Just completely at the bottom. But then having to face, you know, the reality of trying to, because I want this business to last, and in order to do that, you sometimes have to make decisions that are difficult in the short run that have greater potential in the long run. And so having to make this decision to calibrate our the way we were running the company was necessary, and but it was very difficult, and it pushed me into that state where I couldn't, it wasn't so much like, I just didn't want to get out of bed, you know, and if I did get out of bed, I would get out of bed just to move my body around enough to get tired enough so I could go back to sleep. Which is where, wow, there's a ladybug just landed on my head. That was perfect timing.
Very nice. Very succinct to what we were talking about.
Yeah.
But we also talked about the naps. Like I remember the first time I came here, you said, you know, I'm just waking up from my third nap or whatever it was. Yeah. And I think that's another thing, is the naps just help you escape the reality of what we're dealing with.
I can't wait to go back to sleep, because then I don't have to face all this, and I can just be sleeping, and I don't know what's happening. You know, it's like it's just a desire to just be asleep. And I was I don't know, I was a dead man walking. I had
Yeah.
nothing left. And this was earlier this year. I'm not that far climbing out of that canyon, and I was down. And but I joined a group called COPA here in Madison, Community Organizations Promoting the Arts. It's a great story of how I found it. I won't go into it here, but a friend of mine, Brent Gerlach, he was working with Dale Sticka, the founder of COPA. And I just made fast friends with Dale, and he had a vision for building this community arts campus. He had purchased a bunch of warehouse buildings off the Beltline and had this passion for bringing artists and musicians and all kinds of creative people together around this mission. And I had been going up there, and every Wednesday they have something, whether it's a hip hop or a jazz or blues performance, some kind of jam, open mic, whatever. And so I started getting out, and I had been using live music as my coping mechanism. I had been going to a lot of live shows, and I came to realize like I was doing that because it was the only way I could feel anything, to be honest with you. Like going out and being around microphones and amplifiers was the only way that I could feel anything. And I needed to be front row center because I needed to stand next to the PA, and I needed to feel it in order to just... Yeah. So I was going to, this year alone, I went to like 70 some shows, and it's almost every day by 1 o'clock or so in the afternoon, I start looking around at the calendar.
See what's up.
There's going to be something tonight, and I want to know where it's at. I want to be in that place where they transcend just the music and create that feeling, that emotion I'm after. But while I was at COPA, I met some people, and I had been inviting people down to try to play music with them. I play piano, and I wanted to use music as a way of healing, and I was writing music. I had written an album dedicated to Candy called With, Without, Within, and that's on YouTube. But it's a ballad that I basically composed in her memory, and had that printed in vinyl, and I had that piece. And now I wanted to move into more collaborative. I wanted to work with other people instead of being here by myself all the time. I wanted other people to come in and...
Because it's therapeutic, but you're also still in your own bubble.
Exactly. And so I met some people, and they came down, and the first group, one of the very first groups came in, and there were 4 of us, I think, and there was one person in particular, I'll name Lenty. She came in, and she just basically said, here's where you put your amp, here's how you turn up the volume, here's how you do this, and she just taught me all this stuff in a very short amount of time. And and then she played the guitar, and we had another guitar and a bass and a drummer. And just to hear that engine running when they started playing, because they were all virtuoso musicians. Like, I was the weakest link. Like, I'd been playing classical music forever, but it was like always kind of, people would kind of try to play with me, and they were all like, that's beautiful, but I don't know what to do with that. It's not on a traditional progression that other people can speak the language. And that's where, when Lenty taught me about 12-bar blues, it's like, it's a structure, and it's repeated, and it's easy. It's pretty straightforward once you get it. And I was just like, and then we started playing 12-bar, and we were all speaking that same language, and it just, and I think the other key that this group taught me was that playing with emotion is where it's at, right? And there's a lot of people that are very theoretical minded and technical about music, but playing from your heart, and I think that was one thing I'll never forget. She played a really sad blues ballad, and it broke my heart in a way that I still to this day haven't shared with her. So if she listens to this, she's hearing it now, but she played that standing right over there with her guitar. She played a song that just shattered my heart to pieces. It took everything I had to not bawl my eyes out. And it was just a really big moment. And like she had no idea. She's just coming over to some dude, whatever, we're just jamming, But for me, I'm like having a meltdown. And and she happened to look just like Candy. So there was like a very complex feeling there. It was like, what was this person like playing? And she plays from her heart this beautiful song. And it was like, the best I can describe it is like a magnetic polarity. It was like a polarity shift happened for me in that moment, that day, where I went from not wanting to get up out of bed to not wanting to go to sleep because I was so excited. Like, this was fun. Jamming with these people woke me up in a way that I just never felt in so long. It's been so long since, it's like going to all these shows to get that feeling, this is like DIY, like in my
it's
own
at your
living
house.
room, you know, like
Yeah.
we can create that here.
I think the funny thing for me is the first time I walked in and I saw the rug hanging from the rafters. I was like, yeah, we're in a different place now. This is something definitely special. But you also, this is a great coping mechanism for you that you've kind of mapped out. I think we said, you know, you're not happy unless you're by the synthesizer, right? Or now the mics or the amplifiers.
Yeah.
But this is definitely a space you created, you know, in honor of Candy.
Yeah.
But also to help you not get over, because that's never going to happen. No. You never wanted to.
No.
But also to help you cope with that loss in a way that kind of pays homage to her.
Yep.
And to have that person who resembles her sitting there and kind of christening the room.
Yeah.
That's got to be something just magical.
But
this is
she was the
your
first
happy...
person to show up. She was the first person in the door. She had no idea where she was. She was told to be here. We were going to have a jam. She came in and she looked around, and I had already started to assemble sort of the music studio kind of vibe because I had all these people coming down and jamming individually. But, you know, she's like, you just need people in here. That's all it is. Like, you just need people. And she started to kind of, again, just taught me. It still continues to this day teaching me so much about music. It's just been, I mean, she's been very generous with her time and very patient with me and sort of explaining all these things. But it's just been incredible. And now I'm jamming and playing in a bunch of different projects and a bunch of different groups. But creating this space, this environment has been a big part of it. That lamp in the corner there, we bought that the day Candy passed. And we wanted to have something that was a memorial that's in here, in the space, that just kind of like, and I gotta say, if that lamp ever goes off, if the power goes out, this space dies. Instantly. It's cold and it's empty and it's just not, but that brings it together and just creating like a warm kind of a healing space is what this is. It wasn't about creating a vibe for anyone other than me. Like, I just needed a cocoon here, a place I could just spend my time just healing and meditating and, you know, burning some incense and just kind of trying to figure out, you know, put the pieces together. But it also happens to work well as a music jam space.
I'm not a musician. I can whistle, not even really whistle well, but when you go up the stairs and you see the guitar rack with 5 or 6 guitars in it, you see the bongos, you see the drum set, the synthesizers. I can't help but think that a musician comes up here and is instantly at ease. I can just see some of these very talented people walking up the stairs, just grabbing a guitar, sitting down, and pouring their heart out. And that just speaks to you on so many levels, because music has become such an important part of your life. But it also gives you a place to share that with people. And to me, that's part of the amazing part of this journey. But it's just such a cool vibe. And I'm going to ask you to take a picture of it before we turn everything off, because God, it's so cool. It just reminds you, like, this should be on an album cover somewhere. It's just such a cool thing. And it's not just visual. Like, you feel the energy in the room. And it feels warm. It feels like, I was trying to think of a way to describe it on my way over, and I'm like, you know what, it's going to come to me when I sit in the room, and it did. It reminds me of that safe, warm, inviting place that maybe you walked into when you were a kid, and that energy just kind of hits you when you walk up here. And for me, walking in here is cool. I can't imagine just waking up every morning and going and getting to sit in this kind of thing that's just so healthy for you and helpful and healing for you. So
it is.
Again, thank you for letting us do this here.
Absolutely. Well, I've been telling people since we started assembling this that this room is going to be used in some capacity to create legendary content. Yeah. And I don't know where, how, or what. It might be this podcast. We'll find
probably.
Out. But, probably the podcast. But I want to be adjacent to the creation of legendary content. I don't have to be out in front of it. I don't have to perform it. I don't have to, I just want to be a part of the creation of legendary music that's transformative for people in a way that's beneficial, right? Because that emotion, I think it wasn't just like, gee whiz, this person can play with their heart and feel emotion. That's incredible. That's a very exceedingly rare skill, I think, for most of the people. I go to all these shows and I'm looking for that. It's hard to find, and to have somebody that can do that. But it's about resonating that emotion with other people, because a lot of times, the feeling that you're feeling, like the grief that I feel, it's devastating for me, but it's also, everybody's got that in them. And so it's like, it kind of, you speak the same language and you start to bring that out. And especially when it comes to playing and performing music and writing music, I've been realizing and learning this through the process that if I write a song that's about my grief or feeling down, I've often felt very vulnerable about sharing that, because it's a deeply personal thing and you don't really want to open yourself
Right.
up to that capacity. But what I'm learning is that when I do, it's not about me. It's about everybody else has a similar story. They've got not similar stories, but they feel gravity is gravity. Like grief feels grief, sadness feels sadness, and they can take that emotion through their lived experience, through their instruments, and reflect it back to you. And then you've created something that's bigger than the sum of the parts.
Yeah.
That's the magic. That's what I want to get to every day. If I can figure it out.
If you don't mind my sharing, like, you shared something with me before we started the podcast, or before we started this episode, that was just haunting. And it's so simple. It's just simple words on a, I was reading it while it was playing, simple words on a white piece of paper that just breaks you in half. Lazy day.
Lazy day.
And if you don't mind, just share a little bit, about what that is about. Because when you told me, it was like one of those things where it's all around you and you just miss it.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I think looking back, when you think about your memories become real important when you lose your soulmate, right? You really cherish those memories. And when I reflect back on our time together, it wasn't the time we were at Disneyland or the time we were, those big moments where you think it's the big thing, but it's really not. It was the lazy days. It was the days when we got up and we probably should have been working or should have been doing something. There's always a should have been, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. When we didn't, we just decided to lay low, have some pancakes and go for a walk, maybe go to the park. And you just have to constantly be sort of like guarding against that guilt that's telling you should be doing, should be working, what are you doing? What are you wasting your time? But it's that lazy day. And I came to realize in my memories that those lazy days, and they're the pinnacle of human existence when you think about it. It's not a throwaway day. It's almost like the peak of what you can achieve as a human on the planet. If you get the privilege to be in a situation where you can take a day and you can step away for a little bit from the work that you got to do and eat those pancakes, take that walk, make some popcorn, go to a movie, do whatever you want to do. Yeah. You're stealing time for yourself and creating that ordinary day that's magic. And so that piece is about, it's a message. It's basically a statement about like, you're going to have those lazy days, but like if you can find your way to that peak, like take the lazy day, because you never know when it's going to end. Right? Yeah. You never know when it's over. So the message is sort of one of like, if you have an opportunity to take a lazy day, take the lazy day.
And stop feeling guilty for it.
Stop feeling guilty.
Yeah, enjoy it.
Yeah.
Take it in.
Yeah. Even if you just want to create art in the morning, like I'll get up and I draw a sketch with colored pencils every morning, and I come out and I sketch, and I've got that guilt in my head the whole time. Like, you should be on a call. Why aren't you doing work? What you got to be preparing for your day. You've got a bunch of meetings. You're going to be done. And I hear, what are you drawing? Colored pencils?
Four?
Yeah. What? Yeah. Like my colors are out, and I'm drawing, and I'm watching the sunrise while I'm drawing my colored pencil sketch. But you realize though that those moments, that's what it's all about. Like it's those steal away moments, the lazy day, the ordinary day that it's all about.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned like the lazy days aren't. They are the pinnacle. They're not the Disneyland trips. Yeah. And I just in that moment I thought too, how many times do we look through our phones and see hundreds of pictures that mean almost nothing to us? Yep. At the moment they meant something. Yeah. But I think to those moments they've had their moment. Mm-hmm. And maybe I shared. Do I really need 47 pictures of the same damn thing? Yeah. When one will elicit the same amount of emotions and memories that they would have. So we talked about how this has kind of become that, and you said it's kind of a place where everybody can kind of let it down. But then we talked about lazy days, and something you just said in that reminded me of something else I wanted to talk about. We've kind of coined the phrase, not that we're that cool that we can coin our own phrases, but the avatars that we all kind of live. Yeah. And in past times we've talked about, we all know that dude who put his hat on backwards for the first time when he was in 7th grade, and now he's that same dude, at 47, He's the hat on backwards, tough guy. You've got to check the scores all the time. And, and just realizing that, I think it also opened up this, in my mind, I think so often we are just in this perpetual cycle of those avatars, you're the hunting guy, you're the guy that hunts all the time, you're the guy that goes to concerts constantly, you're the guy who just, Megadeth and Metallica is your whole life since 7th grade. Dude, that was 40 years ago. What the hell are you doing? How do you, we talk a lot about the authenticity, and that's what these have become to me. Like, I let my guard down so much when I'm around you and around my other friends. One of my favorite things to do, my sons play sports. There is nothing better than sitting at the top of that 50-yard line, hanging out with the guys and just talking shit, just being stupid. It's some of the best therapy because we've let down these things and we're authentic. We are who we are. We're not trying to pretend to be anything else. How do you, and I know a lot of that is this, how do you kind of strip back all of the macho and alpha dog kind of bullshit that this life has come? Because there's going to be people who look at this and be like, dude, look at those two betas talking about their feelings.
Right. Hippie.
Hippie and whatever this polo is, So I just share with you.
First podcast.
So I was talking to my son about the podcast. He's like, what are you going to wear? And I'm like, I'll wear a black polo. And he's like, no, you got to wear something cool and hip. And I'm like, I don't really have any cool and hip. And he's like, I'll go. He's messing around in my closet and comes back like 5 minutes later. He's like, you just wear the polo. I knew it was over at that point. Like, I'm not that guy, but just being this authentic person, how does that sit with you? Because I feel very beta when that happens. I'm okay with that. I have a real problem with alpha males. I have a real problem with the real boisterous, loud, obnoxious, go team kind of stuff. Like, I'm as patriotic and as much a fan of any sports team as the next guy, but I'm not this rah-rah guy, and those guys really kind of rub me the wrong way. Those guys who kind of look at people like us having this conversation and put some sort of negative pejorative on that. How do you kind of reconcile with that? Because you are in a different place, obviously, than we were in high school, when it was you're trying to become that.
Yeah.
It's a very different situation than where we are right now, where we're trying to peel that back. Back in high school and junior high, you're definitely trying to layer that on for some sort of protection, obviously. But now I think the protection is removing it. How does that kind of sit with you, especially being in the kind of business world that you're in, where maybe there's a little bit more accepting of it, but there's also got to be those guys who can't stand guys having conversations like this.
For sure. Well, I think it goes back to just being true to yourself and forging your own path, and I'm continuing to do that, and I'm not really too concerned with other people, what other people think I should be doing. I never really have. I've kind of always had that sort of like, I don't have. It's no disrespect to anybody else. For people that like sports or like other things. I mean, I was born real close to Green Bay, Packers territory. It's in my blood, and so I get it, But I think where it becomes unhealthy is when it becomes an identity that's suppressing something else, right?
Yeah.
If you're covering over something that you really feel with some sort of avatar or algorithm that you're running that you were handed to as a kid, right? Essentially, sometimes those algorithms can be helpful. They keep you on track and they encourage you to do the right thing and keep focused, but a lot of times it becomes a kind of armor, a kind of a shell that you build that gets heavier over time. The more layers that you add to it, the heavier it gets.
Yeah.
And the heavier that armor gets, the harder it is to carry it around, and the more you just get bogged down by it.
But the more you're also force feeding this avatar.
Yeah.
This is who I am. This is
Yeah.
You can't crab me. I'm a tough guy. I'm a whatever.
Yeah.
We have a friend that's the Bush Light guy, and one of my friends mentioned him the other day. I'm like, I was thinking to myself, what the hell is that Bush Light hiding on him? And I joke about the hats on backwards dads, because to me it just drives me nuts. Like, that's who you are. I love you. Do your thing. But to me, it's just like this huge red flag that you're hiding some shit. And
I mean, that's one of the good things about, if there's nothing good about losing a spouse, but a silver lining is that it's a zap of clarity. like you instantly become clear about the fact that this life doesn't last forever. It's actually very, very short. It can be extremely short. And you really want to make sure that your authenticity became really important to me. And I think that's ultimately where the fuel ran out of the tank for me in the business world, was that so many people in the world of business are exclusively focused on profit. And you know, you have to make money in order to run your business and to support your family. And I put a lot of emphasis on making sure that I provide stability for my team, and something I took really seriously. But you're operating in a world, especially if you're trying to raise investment capital, I'll be honest about that, was real difficult, because you're dealing with some phony baloney people who only care about finance, which, again, if that's all they care about and that's what they're truly, genuinely passionate about, by all means, like, everybody should be able to do what they want, but it wasn't my thing, and I became starved for authenticity. I became very much, and I think, again, that's where the microphones and amplifiers came in, because you can't lie. You know, when you're getting up on stage with a guitar and an amp and a mic, you gotta, what are you gonna do? It's important.
You strip down naked.
Yeah, you got nothing protecting you. The armor's gone, and if the armor's there, it's gonna sound, your music's gonna sound shitty.
Yeah.
And so it's that sort of tension between the algorithm and the freedom of allowing yourself to be open so that the muse can sort of like work through you, right? And I think that only happens in an authentic framework. If you're really, you figure out how to kick the cops in the head out, right? You know, where you're like, you know, but I've also learned from my therapist that, you know, sometimes because those algorithms are so deeply baked into who you are, the goal shouldn't be to kill that. You don't want to eliminate the algorithm. You don't, because you can't. It's a part of who you are, but to make friends with it and to understand that it's there for a reason. It's there, it's trying to protect you, and to listen to its voice. You know, if you're meditating, that can help you calm your mind, the monkey mind chatter, calm that down enough so that you can hear that voice and say, okay, like, maybe I should be working, but today I'm going to take a few hours and I'm going to write a few songs. And that's okay. Like, I need that. And to kind of negotiate that, so you're not eliminating that, but you're also not sort of like blocking the muse out of your life, right?
Kind of keeping a good balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we often think of the mental health crisis that we're all in, and let's be honest, it's terrible.
It's terrible.
You know, there's not enough people seeking help. There's also not enough help for those guys that are seeking. So to be able to just talk to each other is, to me, like, I love my therapist. She's awesome. We laugh, we joke. She's the same kind of, she's very young, which is hard for me. Like, she's like, oh, is it weird talking to someone? I'm like, I don't care. Like, you're just, it's nice to have someone listen to me and not say, shouldn't you be doing something else? Like, we take that hour, we talk, we have some great conversations, but, you know, that's great. But sitting here with you, whether it's here or somewhere else or in a different environment, talking to my friends up on the 50-yard line, talking to people over the phone, it's just become so much more helpful to me than any of the pharmaceuticals, any of the other treatments that I've done. You know, we've talked about doing some yoga, doing some meditation. We're going to do a float. We'll see. We'll see what that comes of. But I'm not okay medicating myself for the rest of my life, and this is my next thing. You know, this is the thing that gives me hope, because during this kind of conversation, I don't know how long it's been, but it's been a minute, there hasn't been any of those thoughts. There hasn't been any of those intrusive problems that I have. And the more I do this, the easier it is to me to kind of drown those out. And I'm hoping that people have listened to this and maybe been able to connect with you or myself and say, hey, I'm okay not being okay. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe I should talk to someone. Maybe I should give therapy a shot. Yep. Maybe drugs are the right thing for you. They're not for everybody, but go get that help. Yeah. You know, we had someone in our community just pass away from suicide. And one of the things that a friend of mine reached out and said, you know, they wanted me to hear from them instead of hearing it because of, you know, the issues that I have with that sort of thing. And we were just talking, and I remember at the time saying, I just feel bad that person didn't have anyone to go to. So I checked my list. You know, I got you, I got Sean, I got a bunch of people on there that are my list of people to call. Mm-hmm. You know, when those moments aren't avoidable anymore and you have to address them. Mm-hmm. But just the other day I was thinking, what if she knew who she couldn't call? What if she knew who not to call?
Mm.
You know, that to me just peeled back a layer that I don't know that I'm okay exploring right now, but we know who's going to talk us out of something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, who do you call when you don't want to get talked out of it?
Right.
You know, that's the scary thought is she probably had people that she knew that she could talk to and she chose not to.
Mm-hmm.
She made that conscious choice. That's the scary thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, I think the misconception is everybody thinks that someone who's suicidal, you see that constantly. They're the, you know, emo kid. They're the this kid that does the cutting. They're the person who is whatever. They're Robin Williams. Robin
Mm-hmm.
Williams made people laugh constantly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, they're the Philip Seymour Hoffmans, do the same thing.
Yeah.
They're the me. They're the you
Mm-hmm.
who hide that from those people so that we don't give that pain away.
Yep.
At some point, John, there's going to be times in people's lives when they're suffering like this that they know who they can't call.
Yeah.
And that's terrifying.
Yeah.
You know, when that decision has been made, and just thinking of that and shared that with someone the other day, and it really just was one of those things that's just been impactful. It's been preying on my mind the last couple of days because it's one of those things you can't answer that.
No.
You know.
Yep.
But everybody should have a nice chain of people to call. You know, and you know what? Honestly, I think you should use that as a fire extinguisher. You know, you should check that once in a while.
Absolutely.
You know,
Keep
make
it
those
going.
phone calls.
Yep. You have a steady stream so that you're not the first time talking to somebody. It's been years. You know, you want to have a framework, right? You've been talking for a while.
Yeah, there's been times when I just have been in a weird place and called a friend, and I think one of the times I just called him and we were talking about lacrosse. My sons play lacrosse, and I was just bitching about lacrosse, and he knew that conversation had nothing to do with lacrosse.
Yeah.
And when I was ready to put that phone down, he wouldn't let me. You know, he kept in a very kind of covert, hey man, well what about this? And what'd you think about that? Even if it was keeping me bitching about it, he kept me on the phone to where he thought I was in a place that was better. So I, thank God I have friends like that. But, like I said, what preys upon my mind are people who don't have that, are people who know how to avoid that.
Yeah, you have to have that community, right? In Buddhism, they call it the Sangha, your community. And I think it's important because you can't see the label from inside the jar, right? And, my therapist talked to me early on, I think it's called the Johari window, where there's like a quadrant, and like there's certain things you know about yourself and everybody else also knows about you, but there's also things that you don't know about yourself that other people can see. And I think it's about sort of having good friends who see that and they know the whole story, and they're able to like help you see something that's innately already you. They're not trying to like talk you out of something or show you something different. They're just helping reveal the light that's already in you.
Right.
And I think that's, somebody, I'm sure Ram Dass or somebody said, it's like we're all walking each other home, essentially.
Yeah.
Right? We have to be here for each other because sometimes you need somebody to remind you that you are loved. And if you don't have that, that's difficult. So developing that Sangha and having that community and having people you can talk to, and also on top of getting the proper institutional channels, making sure you're talking to your doctor, make sure you have a therapist, make sure that you're very transparent and open about that with the people who can provide. There's all kinds of different reasons why these things can be happening. It can be happening because of a grief or a trauma, like in my case, but it can also be a physiological thing that has nothing to do with anything about who you are or your feelings or your identity. It's just a physiological underpinning thing that happens on a neurological basis that can be solved pharmacologically. That there are medicines that can be prescribed that can be life-changing, to turn things around, and suddenly you're living your best life, but it was just an underlying, just like if you break your arm, you go to the doctor, you get there's things that can happen neurologically that I don't think you can't diminish, just the importance of that approach. But all of that together, it's like a constellation, right? Trying to manage these feelings, it's a whole constellation that you have to be working all those different things in order to keep yourself, make sure that you're giving yourself every chance you got.
Yeah, and I think your therapist probably shared this with you. Sometimes you have to give that moment its moment, and then pack it away. Yeah, just move on, because sometimes I get just stuck in this repetitive cycle where it's just, okay, well, I'm starting to feel better. I should think about that again, so I feel like shit again. You know?
Yes.
And
I don't deserve to feel better.
yeah, I don't deserve to feel better.
Right.
Or in my case, what was I like when I was better?
Yeah.
You know, is that who I want to be? Because right now I'm still kind of stuck in this. I don't know who I am.
Yeah.
I don't know who I was. Don't know who I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's kind of freeing because you can kind of be who you want to be.
Yep.
But it's also, you have to take time to look back. But yeah.
Yeah. Anybody who's watching, this is why I love this guy, right? I mean, like, I could talk to him for hours about this stuff, and like I think we're resonating on certain, you know, deeper things that we, but like just overall, what a great conversation.
Yeah.
You know, I cherish our friendship. I'm glad I
Same.
know you. I
Same.
mean, decades of history. We missed a few.
we got
missed
time.
a few, but we're back.
Yeah.
You know, and this was a great conversation. It's
Yeah,
just it's
absolutely.
great having your the mojo here in Studio Wildwoods.
Absolutely. We'll have to take it on the road and see who else we can bother for a couple hours.
Yeah. Well, I got a couple of things I want to say. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, a couple of things I want to add. So first of all, we have these nice microphones that I don't know how they work. I know nothing about gear. We had them all set up, and I've got them going into an interface, but that laptop has an issue with CPU that getting full. So it stopped recording. We're not going to be able to have the audio from here. So you're going to be hearing shitty camera audio, and also unfortunately my dog is scratching at the door over there, and he's been crying and whining through the whole episode, so apologize for that in advance. We'll fix those things if we ever do this again.
Oh, we will definitely do it again.
Better audio, better video, better everything. We'll figure it out. But
yeah, but you know
this is
what?
our first
Authentic.
chance.
It's authentic.
This is authentic, and we
But-
got it done.
Yes.
That's the most important thing. We actually
Yeah.
did it.
Yeah.
Assuming
absolutely.
that's still recording, there's a chance it might have stopped. And then
Well,
we gotta
if
do
it
this all over
hasn't
again.
stopped, thank you guys,
Yeah.
and look forward to doing this again sometime. And thank you again for all your tutelage, but also just for being present in my life. I appreciate it, buddy.
Yeah, likewise.
All right.
Cheers, Tim.
Be good.
Just another lazy day with you, finding every single way. There's nothing left to say. Had a plan we threw away. We're free to come what may. Why ask why? Why ask anything? If you found your way to someone that brings you peace. Just an ordinary day with you. There's nothing to get done. Take a nap under the sun. And if darkness comes too soon, we'll sleep under the moon. Why ask why? Why ask anything if you found your way to the peak? Why ask why? Why ask anything? I couldn't have known how soon you'd leave. What I wouldn't give for another day. Just one more lazy day, with nothing in the way, in an ordinary way, 'cause you never know how long you have, and those lazy days just don't last. So don't ask why, don't you ask anything. If you found your way to that peak, don't ask why, don't you ask anything. I just hope you know how much it'll mean. Just another lazy day.